We are back, everyone. We've got a couple of Les Paul standards here. This one is in for a bridge swap. This one over here is a bit more of a heartbreak. So it's another broken Les Paul headstock. This is a brand new guitar. The guy bought it from the store and obviously got it at a huge discount and shipped it up from Pennsylvania for me to do the restructuring. You know, I had to look at this a few times because I realized, it sort of dawned on me as I went to line it up, there's some of the fiber was missing, and on the back some of the lacquer was missing. The real telltale signs to line this up, where this kind of tapers out, we got that lined up perfectly, and then the outside perimeter shape tells me exactly where this piece needs to be pinned before we heat up the hide glue. Although you can kind of see this space here, well, you know, there is lacquer missing. This lined up perfectly. The outside perimeter of the headstock lined up perfectly. As I mentioned a second ago, the cavity for the truss rod lined up perfectly, and this is perfectly flush. What these mini drill bits are indexing pins to hold this whole thing in place so that the parts don't drift on the bed of hot hide glue. So I just drilled the hole with this bit, flipped it 180, pushed it back in. That's our indexing pin. So we're going to pull this apart, heat up the hide glue, and glue it up. And that will be the first step. Okay, we have that heated up. 147. I'm going to bring that up just a little bit more. We'll give that a stir. We've got sort of the right viscosity here. Let me change the camera angle. You can have a look at this. So this is the sort of thickness or consistency or viscosity that we're looking for. Give that a stir and then wipe it. See how it runs down the edge of the pot like that? That's exactly the thickness we want. 152, we're good to go. Here we go, showtime. It's hot water right out of the pot. And we're going to start by slicing up some spline stock out of this chunk of mahogany. You can see the grain is pretty vertical. It's not 90 degrees, but it's vertical grain. Give us a little bit more tensile strength. So the purpose of this thinner piece, the one you saw me just make, I took a tracing off the wall there, and then I finessed it and got it so that we have 100% contact. What we're really looking at is the floor of this elliptical dado. So this thin template lets you see that we've made 100% contact end to end. This is what we're going to use to trace the mahogany spline stock. So that's next. I'll trace that convex form first, and then I'll move this over so that we get a sense of the actual size. So now we are doing the final sort of dry run fit. I just want to make sure that that spline is seated firmly all the way along that elliptical dado, which it is. Once that is done, then we trace not the outside, the inside, because the highest part of the spline, and we trim it back to the bandsaw. We'll leave that line on. You want to leave it a little higher than it needs to be. We'll sand it flush before finishing. Just going to kiss that pencil line on the edge of the sanding disc. I do use this disc sander for the final kind of press fit. Bring this one down to the final height. So this gives us a 3/8 of an inch spline to give us the strength we need. Because this headstock was completely severed, I've gone to a little bit thicker spline. While I was working that mahogany chunk, I've got enough. I get basically a pair of splines out of each piece. So I got enough for 4 more neck surgeries. And as I explained earlier, every neck surgery is going to be slightly different. So I'll work that tracer template to fit, you know, the next 3 or 4 or 5 neck surgeries, and then I'll make a new one when I need it. We've got a new overlay to put on the face of this headstock, so I'm going to get started on that. Before I go any further on this, I wanted to stop, especially for you Patreon 3 guys, and explain what we've got here. This is the fiber overlay that Gibson used from the factory. So when I skimmed off that original fiber, I just wanted to show you what I used here. I have a piece of brass shim stock to protect the end of the fingerboard from the sander. Anyways, we got this where we want it. Now the next step, of course, these overlays are slightly oversized. So what I did was I ran a couple of pieces of masking tape around. I made up these tapered indexing plugs. So these 2 plugs basically hold this thing centered. Then I traced with a pencil all the way around, and then I cut along the line, leaving a little bit more than we think we need. And now I'll work that down on the edge of the conversion kit sander for the drill press. So I'm not bringing this down to the finished dimension, I'm just bringing it a lot closer. Especially this I will work by hand and get that as close as possible so that after we glue it on, there'll be very little left to sort of deal with. Not trying to finish it here, just kind of bringing it in much closer. So this is our dry run setup. I'll mix up that 24-hour aviation epoxy after lunch, and then we'll set this aside for the day. So there's my clamping configuration for that overlay. This is 24-hour aviation epoxy. So I cut that back pretty close to the finished size. So the rest I will scrape and sand flush with the razor blade, and then we'll be on to finishing. Now, although this is a 24 to 36 hour aviation epoxy, it gels in about an hour and then fully cures in 24 to 36 hours. Very few things that I use this epoxy for. This is one of them. Just taking our plugs out, we still can. And that we shall set aside for a full day, and we'll be back to sort of just do that final trimming all the way around. All the structural stuff is done. Now we'll get it out to Darcy for finishing. So when Darcy blew in the repair, he started with the same color match, but he started opaque and blew in that red opaque color over the repair and then gradually blended it towards the top end so that it became translucent. So when you look at the actual break point, it is virtually undetectable. And this is the replacement overlay with the Gibson Pearl logo and the Les Paul model decal. Now for the truss rod cover, the original truss rod cover that was on the guitar that had the word standard engraved into the black, white, black engraving stock, that's easy enough to change. The customer can order that from Gibson and it's a 2-minute swap out. And of course we've got our compensated nut for the 10 to 46 strings in concert pitch. And this will be shipped back to Philly this week. I did wrap the 2 thumb wheel drive bridge posts with Teflon tape and then wrap the bass side post with aluminum tape, and that took up all the play and looseness in the bridge to post fit. The 2 lugs for the tailpiece were also wrapped. The bass side was wrapped in Teflon tape, and the treble side where the ground wire connects was also wrapped in aluminum tape so we don't disrupt the grounding of the bridge. This is where the headstock was snapped right off. Darcy's blown that in with that opaque red that gradually fades to a translucent red, and that makes the repair itself undetectable. So I have once again chosen a progression that spans 5 or 6 different positions so you can hear the chords. So that is the loop. you.